So there are quite a few secret interactions that you may have not known about in Borderlands 4, and I kinda wish that I knew some of these myself my first time playing. That is why today I'm going to go over some of the biggest things the game doesn't tell you, as well as many more mistakes to avoid along the way. Coming up to number 1, you can actually send items back to your bank without even physically visiting it. The way to do this is simply right-clicking on any item and then marking it with the bank tag. In this case, you can mark as many items as you wish from different categories, and assuming you have enough space left back at your bank, you can then just press and hold V to send all of these items back to it. In this case, it's going to send all of them from all different categories, but just keep in mind that in the current display, it's only going to show the ones marked in the current category you're in. But rest assured, every single one of them will be sent there. And yes, this is going to just save a ton of time, especially when you're out farming and your inventory is about to get filled. You can simply send a lot of them back and then continue farming without being interrupted. Moving on to number 2, you can actually reset your skill points for absolutely free. Well, kind of, so let me explain. So if you have any skill points available, you can invest and instantly reset them as many times as you wish, as long as you don't leave this skill menu screen before committing to them. So if, for example, you misplaced a point or changed your mind, you can just reset that point right away, but again, only as long as you didn't exit this screen or switched to another tab. The game doesn't even give you a confirmation when you fully commit to that, so that is why this may be easily overlooked. However, the moment you commit those points and then leave this menu, your only choice remaining is to go to a respecking station and pay the price to do it the normal way. This may come in handy if you're out in the wild and can't afford to teleport back in case you want to properly set up your build following this. Moving on to number 3, fishing can actually give you some very strong legendary loot, including a very powerful legendary grenade. But you may be doing it wrong, so let me go over this really quickly. First of all, you're going to find these fishing spots across many bodies of water randomly spawning, and in this case, you're not just going to want to yank things out of the water, as chances are you're going to mostly just pull off trash. Instead, pay attention to the hook icon right here in the middle, and if you see it completely static and semi-transparent, wait for a little bit until it starts doing this animation, where it starts wiggling and also slightly increases in size. That's going to indicate this is the perfect moment to go ahead and pull it out, which more often than not will now cause some of this loot explosion that, at least in my case, had a lot of chances to actually give legendaries on quite a few occasions, even starting at low levels. So this is going to be the primary way of doing it, and if you're lucky enough, you should even get a super interesting legendary, which is the Slippy Grenade. This actually lets you throw a swordfish that bounces on the ground, dealing a ton of damage in a pretty good AoE, knocking back enemies with great force, and even having a chance to spawn other fish, so it can actually increase in radius. It may not be the best of all of the grenades in the game, but it's definitely one of the best, and it can definitely carry you, especially if you get it early on. Moving on to number 4, this may be a little bit contrary to what you're used to in video games, but I highly encourage you to actually play the game on the hard difficulty. Yes, I know it's probably going to make the game harder for you, but you don't have to do it right from the start. The moment you find your build to actually be very strong, especially after getting Splash Zone done, I recommend going with the hard difficulty. This only increases the damage enemies deal against you by a measly 10%, but this is going to increase the loot quality for you, which means you're going to have more chances at legendaries. Now, yes, technically this also means your elemental affinities become more important, so otherwise your effectiveness may be as low as 50% lower than before, but as long as you know what you're doing and pay attention to what type of health bar you're dealing damage to and using the appropriate element, you should not have any issue, especially since now, at least on average, the loot quality dropping for you should be a little bit better, at least getting more legendaries and whatnot. Again, I recommend giving it a try at least once, or at least when just taking down bosses for farming reasons. You can always just change the session settings at any point in the game, and it's only going to reset you back to the previous save point, which is actually going to be pretty close by. And since we were on the subject of boss fights, at number 5, my next recommendation is to try to unlock as many of them as you can. Not only is this going to give you access to even more farming, to even more legendaries, because a lot of them have dedicated drops, but you will notice that as you get closer and approach endgame, there are weekly bosses that get a special benefit every single week. For example, this week we have this drill site over here that for the longest time I completely ignored and never appeared as a rotation on my map until I actually went ahead and did it, and I noticed that now I can do an improved version of it by just paying Iridium via the weekly, of course, challenge, which in this case had much better chances to provide those legendary drops out of that specific encounter, even though it did become a little bit more difficult. And it's not just for these weekly farming reasons, it's also because that's how you're going to unlock some of the higher Ultra Vault Hunter mode levels. Especially pay attention to those auger mines, because a lot of those bosses at the end of them are part of the rotation that will bring you from Ultra Vault Hunter mode 1 all the way to max 5. This brings us to number 6, and maybe you want to progress with your vehicle engine. You can pretty much customize the vehicle engine with different manufacturers that give you slightly different stats, depending on the type that you want. Some may have better speed, but worse acceleration, or better handling, but worse boost, and so on and so forth. And you can actually rank every single one of them up, so at the end game they will become a lot more useful. But to actually unlock extra engines and get that rank from 1 all the way to the max, you're going to want to pay attention to specifically these challenges over here that are specifically aimed to taking down enemies with different manufacturers. And the ones I mean are exactly here at the top. You will even see them by their distinctive icons, which basically indicate you're going to get an engine upgrade. So like for example, in this case, if you defeat a certain number of enemies, let's say with, I don't know, order guns and gear, that's how I was able, for example, to get this order vehicle hover drive over here. But of course, you're going to unlock the majority of these anyway as you play in the game. However, if you have just a few more points left and you've noticed them in that challenge screen, just go ahead, defeat enemies with that specific type of weapon or gear, and you're going to get it soon after. Moving on to 7, as we were on the subject of getting stronger, legendaries aren't necessarily the best items in the game. There are quite a few that are lower quality but may have much bigger stats, which is why you may want to pay attention to at least the tier below. Like for example, all the purples. And just to give you an example, at some point I got a shield that gave me 40,000 shield. It was only a purple, but it literally is still to this day the best and highest that I got from any shield in the game, which gave me a lot of tankiness. It let me survive a lot of tough moments, and it's just one of the examples. There were many other moments when I got a very good purple weapon, for example, that carried me more than a legendary I had, maybe even a couple of levels above, just because of the interactions on it. This is something that you should test right away. You have the weapon switch the moment you get an item, so give it a go for at least a split second, see if you like it, because you never know, you may get something really strong. But let's keep on going, because the next tip is that there are actually loot twinks in this game, and literally it took me over 120 hours to even realize this, maybe because of all of the splash effects, but it seems that they have been slightly changed from before. So in this case I noticed that a random Reaper was just running away with essentially what was just a loot twink gear and also that shiny golden effect before it disappeared. Unfortunately I panicked and pulled the wrong weapon on it, so it pretty much ran away. But if this means what I think it means, I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a pretty good way of farming some extra legendaries every now and then. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem you can respawn them the way we did, at least in 3, so for the time being it seems that they are totally random, but also totally possible. So if you see them, take them down before they get a chance to escape. It doesn't take long for them to do that. Anyway, before we actually go to the last and final most useful tip, I have a couple more to give you really quickly. One is that we can actually activate a radar mode. While it doesn't actually benefit us in many ways, like it would have been nice if this was a mini-map and whatnot, but it can help with orientation a little bit. For example, if you're in a big enemy camp and want to see better where your enemies are around you, this can definitely help, even though it comes at a cost of cluttering the screen a little bit more. And finally, this brings us to the last tip, and that is, do not discard the low level items, especially the ones that will feature some of these, of course, set bonuses on them. So you're going to notice quite a few of the items, especially in the gear category, like shields, ordnance, and even some of the enhancements will feature at least one of these bonuses on them. And the thing about this is that once you finish the main story, you can actually transfer those bonuses to another item of maybe a higher level but of the same category. And in this case, you may find something with some really useful bonuses like extra gun damage or skill cooldown rate and whatnot, and then you can just transfer them to a legendary that may be much better but wasn't lucky enough to actually drop with that specific set bonus on it. Do however keep in mind that you can only perform this process once, at least on the first level of Ultra Vault Hunter mode, which in this case will prevent that from being transferred again to another item a second time. So once you commit, it's going to be there permanent on the second item you just got. But that is pretty much it with the video. Let me know down below in the comments if there are any other mistakes or any other interesting tips that you know about but the game doesn't make too obvious. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.